I appreciate everybody being here today. And we're going to start with Ross Cottrell, and we're going to talk from his perspective about pickleball paddles. And then we're going to move to Jovanni Garcia of Salt and Pepper Pickleball and talk about the technical side of things. And we have a special guest today in Doug Mauch, who is with RPM Pickleball, and he's going to tell us what they are up to from a paddle perspective. So I will not talk much today if I can help it, because you guys know a ton more about pickleball and paddles than I do. So Ross, please get us started about pickleball paddles. Thank
Good
you.
thing. Yeah. So, as Sean mentioned, my name's Ross Cottrell. I'm the head pro for Pickle and Social Gwinnett over by the Mall of Georgia. Uh, Being the head pro here, I see a lot of paddles, right? And giving a very brief overview of kind of what people look for in paddles and the history of paddles for those that come from tennis and whatnot. The two main things that people look for is how much they can spin the ball and then how powerful it is. Obviously, that's a very generalized way of describing it. But throughout the iterations of trying to find the balance of those two factors in a paddle, we've come across our fourth generation of paddle now. The first one started off as just a simple honeycomb core on the inside, and it was it was first, right? It was the first thing to happen after wooden paddles, right? Then they figured out that they could thermoform the edges. And what that was designed to do was increase the dwell time, right, of the paddle. So the dwell time, how long it sits on the paddle face, it affects how much you can control the paddle, control the ball with your paddle. And then they figured out, hey, there's a thing called foam. So for the third generation, they still had the honeycomb core in the center, but then on the outsides of the paddle face, they added a foam kind of line all around, still had the thermoform edges. And again, it was designed so that you still had decent power from the center of the paddle, the sweet spot, but that foam was built to, once again, give you a more control and more touch on your paddle so that you could, really affect where the ball's going. And now we're on our fourth generation. The fourth generation is where they said we're not going to do the honeycomb core, and we're just going to do all foam. Now, paddle companies have done different styles of foam, whether it's layering, different patterns on the inside to once again all try and find that balance of power versus control. Now, when you're looking at who's going to use what type of paddle, right? You have to understand that everyone's go-to response for paddles is I want a paddle that's fast, one that hits hard and it's powerful, right? I can overpower my opponents. But what people figure out very quickly is it's hard to control a lot of power. You'll find the newest paddle that's hot right now. It's really powerful. It's the Boomstick by Selkirk. As the name suggests, you boom the ball and it goes very hard, very fast. But controlling where it goes hard and fast too, it's a different story. So as people have started to figure out what they like, what they don't like, we've seen that amateurs, especially newer amateurs, they go for actually softer paddles now. They want something that has more spin, more dwell time on that paddle face so that they can actually put the ball in the court. They can try and drop it into the kitchen, right? They can keep a rally going for more than, two or three hits after the serve. However, once you get into the pro level, that's where once again they're back to the power. And for them, they have the natural control with their practice, with their motions, their muscle memory that gives them control with any paddle. So they need that extra power to kind of stay at the top of the game against the other opponents. And so you're seeing that the most powerful paddles are being used at the highest level. However, as you drop down lower and lower into the amateur levels, you're seeing less and less of those powerful as people really try and start competing just because they're harder to control. So going into today, Giovanni's going to go into a lot of the technical side of things about what makes them powerful, what makes them control worthy. Doug has his own paddle that is a very excellent blend of both. And so realizing that there's different things for different people, but at the top level, it's power. As it goes down, it's more about that control. Thanks.
I appreciate that, Ross. And I've always had the question, and I have the same question at all times from a tennis perspective. And I'm going to ask Giovanni to start with this and see if he can answer my question, because we see this with racket marketing and string marketing, and that we have this percentage of control versus power. And I'm very interested in Doug's opinion on this as well. But my question always is, I believe personally, power and control are opposites. I believe you either hit the ball hard or you hit the ball soft. Control is soft, power is hard. So, how can I have a paddle in this case that gives me 100% power and also 100% control? In my opinion, you can't have both. So, can I, Giovanni, if you don't mind, will you start with that concept? I know you've got more to talk to about that, but is there a way to point out that I misunderstand?
Man, that's a good one. Honestly, yes, there's a huge division. You have your power, you have your control. I think from the tennis side to the paddle side, I think it's pretty much the same thing. But where I like to think about it differently is whether the paddle or even the tennis racket has linear power. You know what I mean? Like when you marry that tennis racket to that set of strings, is the tennis racket going to give you enough flexion, enough stability in order for you to swing 100%? But are the strings going to assist because you have different patterns? You have different types of strings. You have oh my God, polyester, synthetic. You have gut strings. You can cross them. You can have gut with polyester, gut with synthetic. You know what I mean? And then you can put them in different places and things like that. So you can actually hone that in to where your 100% is going to be controlled by and assisted by the actual strengths. Does that make sense?
And how does that translate into pickleball?
And then translating that into pickleball, it's going to be the same type of thing. Control, or like I said, power is very linear. So when your 100% and my 100% power, totally different. So maybe you can hit your serve at, I don't know, 80 miles an hour. My 100% is 40 miles an hour. So whereas like a boomstick might help me more than it would help you because your arm is more lively, you have a little bit more strength, you're hitting it more properly. So that way you could actually back off of the power because you're bringing your own power. And then that control is what's going to help you to keep the ball in. So that way you can actually manage your 80-mile-an-hour serve, and I need the extra little bit of power with a little bit less control because I'm hitting it softer, and that gives me the ability to actually roll it in just a little bit more than you can. So that's how I kind of look at like the power and control.
Okay, that makes sense. What else you got?
All right. So
Thank you for
Ross kind
indulging
of
me.
nah, no problem. I hope I gave you a good answer though. um so Ross kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but I took it a little bit different. I wanted to talk more about like the real talk from the recreational courts. And it's about how people are choosing their paddles. Not just from a technical standpoint, but again, but from a social standpoint too. Because whether you realize it or not, paddle choice is becoming just as much about influence and perception as it is about performance. So let's start with the social side. So, because honestly, that's where most players live, right? If you go to any open play, especially at the recreational level, you'll notice something interesting. Players aren't just picking paddles Players aren't just picking paddles based on what fits their games. They're picking paddles based on what they see. So what their friends are using, what trends there are on YouTube or Instagram, what the higher level player at the local court is swinging. And right now the trend is pretty clear. It's still power paddles. At least the courts that I go to, people are still searching for that power paddle. And there's the idea, that more that if you get just more power, your game is going to level you up instantly. And I get it. Power is super fun. Hitting a drive that flies past someone feels amazing. Even in tennis, it feels amazing when you blast one by somebody. But socially, it creates this kind of gear chase culture where players are always looking for the next paddle that will fit their game instead of developing the skills that actually will. Another thing I noticed is how paddle choice can influence confidence as well. If someone shows up with a paddle they've seen a pro or influencer use, then they feel like they're playing better. But even before the first point starts. And confidence, of course, matters a great deal, but it can also mask what players actually need to improve. At the end of the day, pickleball is one of the most social sports out there. People are talking between points, sharing paddles, giving recommendations. So the conversation around pickleball paddle spreads fast, but not always accurately. And that's where I think we have a real opportunity, not just to talk about what's popular, but what's appropriate for different types of players. When we talk about paddles technically, most players focus on, of course, the first thing. Again, is this powerful? But in my opinion, there are really three key elements, and that's going to be power, control, feel, and then slash responsiveness. And for most recreational players, control is actually the missing piece, not power. A more powerful paddle can make drives harder, yes, but also makes resets, drops, dinks way more difficult. And for those softer shots, that's where the points are and that's where the points are won or lost. If your paddle is too reactive, especially at the kitchen line, you're gonna feel like the ball is just jumping off the face without intention. That's not a paddle problem. It's a mismatch between the paddle and the current player's set of skills. So instead of asking what's the most powerful paddle, a better question, in my opinion, would be what paddle helps me keep more balls in play and improve my consistency? Because consistency builds confidence, and confidence actually leads to better performance than raw power, uh, alone. So to kind of wrap it all together, the social side of pickleball is incredibly powerful. It shapes what players buy, how they feel, and even how they play. But if we can guide the conversation just a little bit from what's the hottest paddle to what paddle actually fits your game, we can help players not just enjoy the sport more, but improve it faster as well. Because at the end of the day, the best paddle isn't the most powerful one, it's the one that helps you play your best pickleball. And that's just my 2 cents on it.
I love it. That's a great way to put it. And that gives me really the perfect segue question to ask Doug, which I'm excited about to get his opinion on some of these things because power paddles are popular right now. And instead of the paddle that's right for you. Now, who's going to give that advice? It's usually the coach. I got to go to Ross. And thankfully we have somebody like Ross at a Pickle and Social. Like when I go play darts at the local game place, there's no dart coach around that I can ask to help me with the right dart set. But thankfully, when you go play pickleball just for fun at a lot of places, especially the entertainment places, there is a Ross, and you can go ask and say, "Hey, can you watch me for a few minutes and give me a recommendation?" And then Ross can recommend something like an RPM paddle or something along those lines. But Doug, my question there is, how do you sell to players, because in this case, what it sounds like is you have two different target markets of the same player. The player that's willing to buy from influence, meaning Colin Johns plays with it, therefore I got to have it. It's just going to make me better. It doesn't matter how good I am. Or whatever influencer is playing with it. Or the type that's actually willing to go to Ross or go to their coach and say, what's best for me? I don't care what's out. I don't care if it's a wooden paddle. Is it best for me? And how do I actually figure that out? Because often, again, as Jovanni says, social play, open play, people in the local parks, there aren't just coaches roaming around just waiting to give advice. So it
Mhm.
comes down to a marketing plan. And that's why I wanted to jump in with Doug and say, hey, Doug, does RPM have a plan for this? How do you hit those players when you really can hit them from multiple directions?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, but first I want to say thank you for having me.
Of course.
I want to thank Giovanni and Ross covered. They saved me 10 minutes of talking about paddles and generation 1, 2, 3, and 4. So Ross hit everything on the head there, on the nail on the head with all the different generations of paddles. At RPM, we started with the generation 3 because we started in 2025. So we started with the EVA foam ring around the edges, and then the polypropylene honeycomb center. So, and then now we have the all foam paddle, which we'll discuss in a minute. But um, yes, the biggest thing, and Giovanni hit on it, is that people buy paddles based on what their friends are using or what their friend says, oh, this is the best paddle. You got to get this one. And they buy it with a code they get from a friend at the local courts rather than really trusting people like Ross or doing their research. Some do, some go on the websites and find out, but power has been the ruler of paddles in the last probably 6 months to a year. And I'm in the belief, and I came from the golf world. I was a club pro for 25 years, and every driver hits the ball the same distance now. There are limitations on how far a driver can go, but they all go far. Okay. So everybody wants the longest driver out there. Same in pickleball. Everybody wants the most powerful paddle. And relative to golf, everybody should not have the longest driver out there. They should have the one that goes straighter. And like pickleball, they should have the one that they can control the best. So they're very similar in terms of products and technology. And every paddle made in the last 6 months hits the ball hard. They wouldn't be around or they wouldn't sell if they didn't have some power to them. The best paddles, and your question before was, okay, 100% power, 100% control. Well, in my estimation, what we try to do is 50-50. Have a paddle that has 50% control and 50% power. And there's your 100%. And that's what I think the RPM does. The RPM has, in my mind, the most what we call dwell time, where it's almost like a tennis racket, where the ball kind of hits the face and it feels like it's hitting strings and then kind of jumps off it. What we call in pickleball the trampoline effect, where you get that kind of propulsion off the face. And that's what we're trying to do, is to make the pickleball paddle feel like a tennis racket. You have that soft touch, that feel, and then you still have enough power where you can compete with everybody else. And I think that answers your question, or about, what's happening right now in the pickleball world and what people should be looking for. Power. We have a new paddle coming out called the Q2. Just launched. We sold the first 1,000 in the first 36 hours. It was on the website. It was in collaboration with John Q, Kew. He's probably the number one, or in the top two pickleball influencers, engineering mind, and James Ignatowicz, who was the founder of RPM, top 10 world, or in the world, pickleball player. They collaborated on this new paddle called the Q2, the letter Q, number 2. And it was the first time John has worked with a company on a paddle. He won't promote it. He won't talk about it much because he did design it, and it'll be a little conflict of interest for him. And it's an all foam paddle that is very powerful. I don't think I'm going to like it. I haven't got mine yet, but I don't think I will like it because to me, it's too powerful. It's very close to the boomstick, which was mentioned earlier. That to me is not for most people. It's also $330. Ours is $250 for an all foam paddle. So It's a better price point. I'm not trying to plug it, just putting the facts out there. So yeah, so we have the Friction Pro, the V1, and now the V2. It's an updated version of it, and that has the power and control. The Q2 will be your power paddle.
And I don't mind. We don't mind if you plug it. That's perfectly fine. That's one of the benefits of being here is if you got something to sell, let's talk about it because it's one thing for Ross to say, "Hey, I see a lot of paddles," and have his favorite. It's another thing for Jovanni to test as many paddles as he can get his hands on and say, "Hey, this is my favorite." Jovanni and Ross are different pickleball players. I'm going to be different. I get to see a lot of paddles. I just don't have time to play with them. So, but from your perspective, yeah, you've got something to sell. You think it's the best. Perfectly happy to hear why. And I appreciate you indulging my question because I always want to ask that and say, okay, well, how do we answer this typical idea that says, all right, RPM knows, all right, you guys want power? Here you go. For those of you that aren't going to ask any questions, it's extremely powerful and it's cheaper than the alternative. So you're going to get a strong market response there. But then again, how do you make sure it's good enough? You still got to have that quality that says, all right, this is the type of player that our friction is for because it is that 50-50. It is perfect for the, what would you call it? The 3-0 to 4-0,
Right.
like in that range of where most players are. That's where you want to be from a sales perspective. Where is RPM in the overall world? We've all heard of Selkirk and Yola and kind of the bigger names. You said James is the guy that founded it or co-founded it. Where is RPM in the ecosystem of pickleball right now?
Well, right now, I'd say we're in the premium paddle market. Price-wise, we were at the high end, but now the average, this you just mentioned Selkirks and Yolas. The Selkirk boomstick is $330. The new Yola is $300. So at $250, and have a hard time saying this, is on the lower price end. It's hard to say, and a lot of people, there's rumors out there, how much paddles really cost? Okay, we don't have any pros on our staff, well, besides James, and he doesn't pay himself, so he is free. So we don't have those top pros so we're not paying any, salaries per se or endorsement contracts where we have, where our prices would go up $50 to $80. We will stay in that 250. Maybe when the next foam paddle might come out, might be 275 or so. But we understand the market and we're trying to be somewhat reasonable for a high-end paddle. We are coming out with a paddle in the next couple of months that will be in a better price range of the 150 for that maybe 3.0 beginner player, 2.5, 3.0 to 3.5 player that doesn't want to spend the 250. And that will last you a long time. So we will have that market very soon. A 3.0 player can use the Friction Pro and the V2 and not have a problem. It's got a pretty big sweet spot. Probably not the Q2. I wouldn't recommend anybody starting out. I think Ross mentioned before, I mean, those power paddles, they can be used by the top, say, 5'5" professional players because they can make the ball spin and keep it in the court and hit a volley where it won't hit the person right in front of them in the face and it won't hit the back fence. So that's what those paddles do. And when I play someone with a boomstick, again, I'm not talking bad about Selkirk, but I have a much better chance to win, I believe, because their volley is a good chance it's going long. They might hit a great drive at me that I can't get out of the way of because it's coming at me pretty strong, but their volleys, 5 out of 10 of them are going to go long because it's almost too powerful. Again, it's not made for the 3.0 to 3.5 player. Our paddles are right now, and they will be in the future at a better price point. So that is our goal, is to cover, the whole range of players from 2.5 beginners, entry level paddle to the professional paddle.
And Ross, if I can go back to you, what do you see in your world where you're going to see some people in taking lessons, but also those just at corporate events or people coming out to play on their own as a paddle spread, whether it's specific paddles or not? What do you see a lot of the high end paddles? Do you see the most popular? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so he kind of hit on the head. There's a difference between your premium paddles, which I agree, RPM's in that group right now. Selkirk, Yola, Carbon, Paddle Tech, RPM. You have big dogs in the paddle industry, and then you have guys that are, I don't want to say small, but they're going to be pushing paddles in the $100 range, and they're not as competitive of paddles, but they don't necessarily want to be used by the pros. They want to market to just the 3.0s to 3.5s. So in terms of the spread, going back to the overarching theme, everyone wants to be Ben Johns. Everyone wants to hit really hard. Ben Johns uses a premier paddle, and the premier paddles hit the hardest. So you see, those big five everywhere. In terms of, the specific spreads, right now, RPM is the hottest. The only gripe with RPM is that they sell out. People can't always. There's a
Not
couple of
how
local.
much longer, but you're right now.
Doug says he doesn't even have his yet, and he works with them.
One of my friends, Drew, he runs a paddle store over in Alpharetta here, and he says as soon as he gets them, he pretty much sells out in 2 to 3 days, and then he has to wait for the next batch. So I think RPM would be taking, their newer company. They're going to be taking a lot more of the market share, as Doug mentioned, as they start turning things over a little quicker. Right now, you see Yola still probably has the overall largest market share, especially with the release of their Pro 5s. They came out with a new model. As we mentioned earlier, people like the new and shiny. There's not a ton. If you're a 3.5 player, a Yola, RPM, Carbon, you're going to play pretty much the same way with all three of those. You're going to be smacking the ball out of bounds, struggling to control it. You might get, a little bit of differences, but once again, they're impacted by what they see, the flashy new object, but it is all of those premier paddles. Even though people are, everyone says, oh, I can't control it. Oh, I need more touch, but they don't get a touch paddle. They go get a boomstick. They go get the same paddle that, Yame's using on the Atlanta Bouncers, and they can't control it. But it's the hype around the paddles is so important. And, he kind of downplayed James Ignatowicz. James Ignatowicz was incredibly popular, very funny guy. Everyone knows him in the pickleball space, and he's still going out. And, he was on Nico the Lefty's podcast maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and they didn't even talk about RPM that much, but everyone knows that he is RPM, and just they like him, they see RPM then. And it's just the hype around all these paddles. It builds so quick and it transfers quick sometimes, but it's always up there for those big brands, that those are the ones you see everyone using. Everyone. I just ran a round robin last night. There was 8 people there. Of the 8 that were playing, I think only one person was not using one of those brands I just mentioned. They were using a Vatic Pro, which is actually a fantastic paddle for touch and control. That's what they all should have been using. But again, there was a lot of Pro 5s, there was an RPM, and then there was a lot of boomsticks.
Jovanni, what are you seeing?
Ooh, for me, I'm seeing a lot of boomsticks. I'm seeing a lot of bread and butter locos. I'm seeing a lot of RPMs as well. The friction. I haven't seen anybody with the V2 or the Q2 yet, of course, but I have
Giovanni,
seen
hold
a
on a
lot of
second.
frictions.
Didn't you just get your RPM yesterday? Can you talk about how you play with that?
No, actually, I get it tomorrow.
No,
But
I
I got
thought
the
you.
friction.
Yeah, I thought you bought one, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, the swing weight's a little on the low side for me, because I do like a heavier paddle. Coming from tennis, like I was playing with a 12-ounce racket. So my paddles, normally I have to like weight them up to like 8.5 to like 8 to feel like comfortable. That was the only thing that I felt it needed. Other than that, it felt really good. I was getting a good amount of spin. I was getting an even amount of power. Like what I put into it is what was kicking out of it. And I felt real comfortable with my shots. My confidence level felt really good, especially like at the kitchen. I was able to roll some shots. I was able to keep my dinks low. I wasn't popping a lot up. I mean, right now I have nothing bad to say about that friction right now. And I just got it yesterday. So I mean, give me a couple more games,
Yeah.
but I don't think I am gonna have anything other than the weight to complain on, and that's being nitpicky. You know what I mean? So
Well, as you know, the weight comes light because most people don't like it heavy like you do, like I do. I weigh mine up too, but that's why we make them 7'8",
yeah.
7'9", because most people like it that way. But yes, you put some tape on there, you get to
Hmm.
8'5", that thing will become a machine. So
Really
thank you for
Yes.
that.
not easy to shave it off.
No, yes,
Yeah, you
we
can
have to
always
make
add
them light
weight, right?
because
Yeah.
you can make them heavier, you can't make them lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I don't know.
Ross,
I
thank
can
So
take
you.
some pretty high grit sandpaper. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
so Giovanni, okay, so Doug, is it interesting? And this is obviously a market question, and saying, okay, we're going to see a higher end paddle in a different space. So if we're at the public park, you might see the more affordable paddles. If we're at the fancy club, maybe you're going to see the more expensive paddles. It plays out right here. Even just when you ask the two of them and say, what are you seeing? Sounds like the more expensive paddles are at the entertainment, the people who can afford to pay hourly to play pickleball rather than the public park types. It's all pickleball. This is the best part about it. You know, everybody's out there playing. The question there is, you know, how do we help Doug or the Doug types to be able to say, okay, how do we do more of like what Ross can do, which is, hey guys, why don't you go and actually ask and get a paddle that is good for you rather than just going with the hype. But Doug can sell hype. Doug can't send RPM can't have coaches hanging out in parks at all times ready to give advice, which actually not a bad thought. Let's see if we can figure that one out, Doug.
Yeah.
Ambassador.
Commission only. Commission only
Well, it's
coaches.
kind of right now with the ambassador world, but they all think they're coaches and pros and they tell people what to use. But that's a whole different
Mhm,
topic. I'm not the ambassador. I don't love ambassadors because they put a lot of bad information out there as well.
mhm,
Yeah, and that's, I mean, again, I'll go back to golf where at the private country clubs, you see the $600 drivers. At the
mhm.
public golf course, you see the 6-year-old drivers that they bought online for two. So it's a very similar landscape, and it's just the way life is. And so yeah, but people, you know, at Ross's place, they have to have the newest because they can't have something old showing their friends. So that's why they spend the money. People at the rec courts, and I played at the rec courts for 3 years when I worked at Diadem down at Pompano, and everybody had a different paddle. Now you go to the indoor places. Yeah, I don't go there often, but yeah, they all have the Yolas or Selkirks or RPMs, and it's just the way that the system works. And that's why we are coming out with a lesser price paddle to have the whole, you know, well, we get the rec players and they're using RPM and $150. And just to touch on Ross, and I appreciate you mentioning James, and he does as well. He will listen to this later when I send it to him. James is an incredible person. He was one of the top 5, 10 players. There was an issue with the PPA tour. Him and Ryan Fu and Vivian Glausman did a clinic over in Japan, and then they got terminated from the PPA tour. James did not fight his because he realized that he wants to take this pickleball paddle business and gear and clothing and bag business very seriously. So it worked out in our favor that James is now full time in the pickleball paddle business, and he has moved to China for the most part. He is in Shenzhen as we speak right now. He should be sleeping. It's 2 o'clock in the morning there, or 3 o'clock in the morning there, and he is 15 minutes away from our new factory that we just moved into for much better quality control. So James is hands on as anybody can be. Also, Marwan, his co-founder, is also in China, and they are pretty much touching every paddle that is produced, checking the grit. Some of the feedback on our first paddles 10 months ago was that one side of the face was this, one side of the face was grittier. Well, that is no longer an issue as we have a new factory and James is really literally hands on and they're testing paddles every day. Go ahead, Sean.
Ooh, I have a question.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so one side being different from the other. You can't really do that in tennis, but in pickleball, you could. In table tennis,
Right.
you have different sides for very specific reasons. Does anybody think pickleball would consider that where I'm up the net and I've got one side of the paddle to use for softness, I've got one side that's got extra power, or is there just it's just too fast, there's no way to pick what side? Can I ask Ross this question specifically? You might be best positioned to answer that I could use like a ping pong paddle, the different sides properly in pickleball.
I think you already kind of hit on the biggest issue, especially at the top level. The ball's coming way too fast to flip it around. The other side of it is I mean, paddles are getting overall thinner. You know, 3, 4 years ago, everyone used a 16 millimeter. Now you have 10 millimeter and 12 millimeter paddles that are also in the pro game. The thinner that the paddle gets, the the less core there is, obviously, and you're going to need to have two different types of cores to if you wanted to do two different versions, of the same paddle, one side and one side, and there's probably just not really enough space there because it uses the entire core to absorb the ball, give you the dwell time, and then, as Doug mentioned, the kind of trampoline propulsion back out. If you cut in half what that core is designed to do, it's not going to feel good when you play with it. Do you agree with
I'm
that, Doug?
saying, Doug, consider it between you and me. Have
No.
RPM look into it. That could be the next thing, and then you guys win.
Well, I was going to preface it. I should have said it was not on purpose that the two sides were different. People did not, they're supposed to be the
Just
same grit.
revisit. It's just
But
revisit and say, hey, this
I'm
could be
sure
a thing.
James, yes, it has been talked about. You're not the first one to ask that question.
Oh,
But like
let me believe
Ross
I have
said,
a unique idea.
forehand could have, because I hit a lot of drives with I don't hit many third shot drops, but my third shot drive could have a little grit to make the ball spin and land in. Then
Mhm.
my backhand volley could be a flatter surface, have more power. Yeah, I don't see it ever happening. Again, some pros might take sandpaper, like Jovanni said, and shave one face down, so it's a little firm. But yeah, I don't see it happening. And Ross touched on too, paddles. The thinner the paddle has been more powerful in terms of the thickness. To 14 millimeter is usually faster, more powerful than the 16 millimeter. That is, I think, changing. The number one seller is a 16 millimeter paddle for most companies, because that is what most people should be using for more control. But now the 16s are getting almost as powerful as the 14s with the different cores that we're able to use. So now you can have more control and very similar paddle to the 14 millimeters. Some people still love the 14 millimeter because it is a little more powerful, but I find from the baseline, a 16 millimeter paddle is more powerful because you get a little more dwell time. It's going to come off a little faster. At the net, a 14 millimeter is a little more poppier because you're not getting that as much of a dwell time.
Well, I
Okay.
touch on that too really quick because a lot of people don't realize that there is a difference between power and pop.
Right.
Yeah.
Power is when I swing it, how fast does that ball leave the paddle through my swing? How fast is it going? Pop is if I just had my paddle here and dropped it without a swing, how much is it going to deflect off
Right.
of the paddle? Usually, when people can't control a powerful paddle, it's usually the pop that they can't control. They're not able to turn the angle of their paddle quick enough, so it's popping all over the place and the ball is leaving quickly. It's not dwelling on the paddle face, and so they don't even have a chance to really swing and control it because it's already off their paddle. So as Doug mentioned, I mean, there is a big difference between how long it sits on there, the dwell time before it pops off, and then the actual power that you deliver for the ball through your swing.
That
And
makes
that's
sense.
a
I appreciate the distinction.
Yeah, Giovanni.
Oh, and that's another reason why in my videos I try never to use pop and I try to use reactivity because it's the reaction of how fast it comes off the face. So I would say reactive. It's a highly reactive paddle. So that way people can then differentiate, that power versus pop. Instead of pop, I say power and reactivity off the face. So
And Sean, just one last point here about the difference in the paddles and how they're made. Had this conversation with James, in fact, yesterday, because we're coming out, and this is more for like places like Ross runs or his facility. We're coming out with a beginner entry level paddle for an amazing wholesale price that we're looking to sell 50 to 100 to a place, and we can put their logo on it. But James's comment was that we can do this for a great price because we're buying in bulk, and that will help us, with our bigger paddles, price wise. But there's not a huge difference of a beginner paddle and a high end paddle, as long as the face is also carbon fiber, which this one will be. Fiberglass is a different story. That's cheaply made. So this will be a carbon fiber face with a honeycomb core. So there's not a huge difference of that paddle and our premium, say, of the new V2 paddle. So, which is great for us. But again, it's just to let you know that the difference is not vast in terms of the cores and the carbon fiber. So again,
and that's
for people,
good. I appreciate that specific perspective and reminder, because what we have there, Doug, is the ability to sell to people who want to have their own paddle, people that a few weeks ago connected with Swell Pickleball. Hey, do we need to get in the pickleball business, or should we outsource those things? If I can come to you with my business, if Pickle and Social can come to you and say, hey, we want to have our own Pickle and Social paddles for this thing, and we can buy 100 of them and we can design it however we want, we can still claim that it's a quality paddle. That's extremely important. And I appreciate that. And we will definitely move forward on that as well, because that's a thing that we believe the racket sports world should appreciate. It's a lot easier to do that, it sounds like, than it does for 100 tennis rackets to try to logo something specifically. I think 100 pickleball paddles, for some reason, even though they're the similar price point, I don't think the manufacturing cost, I think the margins are different. I think there's a better way to do that and say, hey, you know what, everybody that comes in is going to get a Pickle and Social pickleball paddle, made by RPM kind of scenario, that we can pull that off for quality and we can start making those connections. I like that a lot. But we are out of time. Doug Mosh with RPM Pickleball, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Jovanni Garcia, Salt and Pepper Pickleball, thank you for your perspective. Ross, thank you so much. I appreciate it, guys. And we will do it again next month. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.